Welcome to our posts. Today we will see stories of r/malicious compliance. Ex-husband backed out on his agreement, ended up costing him so much more in the long run. My ex-husband and I had a great divorce. Even though he cheated on me after 12 years and 2 kids under 4, I really wanted to do things differently than my parents did during their divorce. I never said anything negative about him, and tried very hard to defend him when the kids got upset with him. I extended invitations to the woman he left me for so she would not feel uncomfortable with me, and we became friends. She was basically their stepmom, so why not include her on everything? On holidays, we all had one big dinner, he and her and me and my boyfriend. This made everyone comfortable and the kids never had to choose one side or the other as we were all on the same page. It was such a great relationship that when I had back surgery, I recovered at his house and she cooked for me. He and I were coaches for the kids' basketball and baseball teams, and I helped at their wedding 13 years later. This was not easy for me, as he moved to another state to raise her children, leaving me to raise ours on my own. She quit her job when they got together and I had to return to work to support my kids. But I needed to keep the resentment and bitterness away from my kids. All of this sets the tone for the divorce, but when he initially left, I spoke to a lawyer and got a separation agreement that was really great for me. He asked that I not take half of his retirement, but instead he would pay X in child support and additional Y in alimony, because he was making a lot of money and I was a stay-at-home mom with a country club membership. Yuck, I hated saying that, but it was only to set the scene. Normally alimony ends after 5 years, but because I didn't get half of the 401k, the only condition on ending it was it would end on my remarriage or my death. He agreed with all of it. The thing is, when he left me to move down to where she lived, he left his cushy job and took this promising, but not delivering, position that really screwed him financially. But he never went back to the lawyer to get the child support or alimony reduced. Instead, he borrowed from his mother. When I discovered he was mooching off of her, I suggested to her that she stop paying for him when he finally got back on his feet. She never would do that and continued paying for his life and her to be a stay-at-home mom. Even co-signing for a second home for him when he finally moved back to raise his kids. Hers had graduated and lived in his old house, ours were in high school. He did come to me and ask if I would accept regular child support and half of the alimony, then later when he was really earning money he would pick back up on the past due amount. Not wanting to make waves in an otherwise great divorce, I said yes and kept track each month of what was owed in a shared spreadsheet with him so he could see how far in debt he was getting each month. He ended up owing me $1,000 per month for 10 years, but he said when the kids aged out of child support, he would continue to pay the same amount to make up for the alimony, which totaled $120,000. When my daughter aged out, he continued to pay the same amount, putting a small dent in what he owed for 3 years. Then, as soon as my son aged out, 2 weeks after he joined the Marines, he called me and told me there was no way he was going to continue paying me for the next X years and I could take him to court if I wanted, but there is no effing way he would pay me another cent. This completely blew my mind as we had such a fantastic relationship and it came out of nowhere. I was completely freaked out, but I took his advice. I contacted an attorney, I sent all his calls to voicemail, per my attorney's advice, and I took him to court. The best thing was, prior to the hearing, my attorney put a lien on both homes he had so he could not change ownership to his mom or wife prior to the court hearing. I still have the phone call recording when he realized this and the horrible names he called me for doing that. Since I had kept such immaculate records from that day, he changed payments, and he was aware of his debt rising each month. It was a slam dunk for my attorney. Instead of making small payments for a few years, he had 30 days to pay me $120,000 in full. Unfortunately, the kids now have to choose which parent they visit on holidays, but that was not my fault. I was willing to continue as is and not put any strain on the family relationship. And for those who are wondering, yes, he did cheat on her 2 times before they got married, but she had quit her job when they got together because she found a sugar daddy and had nothing to fall back on / nowhere to go, so she stayed with him. Since we were friends, she shared this info with me, as I would understand what she was going through. Next story. Yes, I'll get you a coffee, but your laptop order goes back to the bottom of the pile. In the early 90s, I worked for an international airline company in the IT department as desktop support. I was the first woman in IT for that company, and most companies in my country back then. The company was located at an international airport and the company was housed in many buildings and airplane hangars spread across and around the airport. The buildings I serviced were mainly the hangars meant for airplane maintenance. Every 6 weeks we would order all the IT equipment that was requested, stuff like specialized printers, computers, terminals, etc. My job was to take the equipment, set it up, and have the person responsible for said equipment to sign off on it. If it wasn't signed off for whatever reason, the equipment came back with me, would be returned to the vendor, and had to be reordered by the department. Being a woman in her early 20s, in a male-oriented profession and dealing mostly with airplane maintenance men, I had to deal with a lot of crap and misogyny. From snickering men having set up their computers I was supposed to service, with hardcore porn screensavers, to men refusing to let me touch their computers and demanding I get a male colleague to do it. Most if the time I just pretended not to have seen or heard what was going on, finish setting up their hardware, have it signed if and leave. Until that one day I just had enough of their crap. That day I had a trolley with me stacked with a bunch of printers and one laptop. Back then only management got a laptop, and if one was delivered it was kind of a big deal. Remember, I'm talking about the Windows 3.11 era. I walked into the airplane hangar with my stacked cart, setting up printers throughout while a team of airplane maintenance dudes were servicing a cargo plane. The minute I walked in there was catcalling, whistling, and "Hey baby, where you going with all that heavy equipment?" As usual I ignored them and just plowed on so I could get the F out of there. When I was done with the printers I had to go find this manager who had ordered the laptop and set it up for him. Airplane hangars are weird places. It seemed to be one giant space with some glass offices just off the side, but it does have all these nooks and crannies that seem to be nothing, but are actually small offices or storage spaces. It's hard to find the right place to be sometimes. So I walk up to a bunch of maintenance guys that are just about to take a break and ask them where I can find Mr. Manager Dude, when one of them goes, "Hey baby, you done with all the heavy stuff? I'd like a black coffee with sugar and my colleague here wants an espresso." To the 5 or 6 other guys this was hilarious, and they started shooting off how they wanted their coffees. One of them actually brought out a tray and handed it to me, telling me to be quick about it. I'd about had enough, and a thundercloud must have been forming around my head because Mr. Manager Guy, I assumed, because he was wearing a suit, who just walked around the corner snickers, goes, "What's up sweetie, got your period?" Of course this was heartily laughed at by all the other guys. I asked Mr. Manager Guy if he wanted coffee too and which kind. I can't remember what kind it was, but I took my cart with the laptop on it, drive it to the coffee machine, made all the coffees, drive it back over, and handed everyone their coffee order. When I handed Mr. Manager Guy his coffee he said, "Okay honey, let's go, I'll show you my office so you can set up my new laptop." I looked him in the eye, smiled, and told him I can't, as I'm late for my next appointment with all the coffee orders. I really have to run. Unfortunately your laptop will have to be returned and you will have to reorder one. So I will see you in 6 weeks. Bye. Of course he tried to tell me he really needed that laptop now, and the coffee thing was all in good fun and I shouldn't be so sensitive, blah blah blah. When I just kept on walking with my cart it turned ugly pretty soon. I was a B and he was going to have me fired. Did I have any idea who he was, etc.? I just silently chucked everything in the car and drive off with him screaming after me. He did try to get me fired, but my manager had my back and made sure his reorder was delayed a few times to teach him a lesson. When I finally delivered his laptop 4 months later he was very respectful though. Unfortunately, it wasn't the last time I had to deal with this kind of crap. Next story. Cheapskate argues over $2.75 iced tea they didn't like on the bill, so I happily switched it out for the $3 soda they ordered instead. Some people are particular about their iced teas. Ours has a tropical flavor, which this woman didn't care for. Can I just get a diet soda instead? Not a problem. Trying to hunt down a manager to void out an iced tea for a soda isn't worth the effort, especially for a negligible 25-cent difference between beverages, so I just let it ride. When the check arrived, the party spent a good deal of time poring over how to split the bill. My manager had swung by to run their cards, and they apparently gave him the same lecture about how we should just have regular black iced tea and said I forgot to take it off the bill. When he voided it off and checked with me, I told him, "Oh, that's right," and they switched to a soda and rang it in. He just shrugged his shoulders like his time had been wasted. I figured the table were either being cheapskates or dumb, so I happily dropped off the new bill and said, "So we took off the iced tea and corrected it with her Diet Coke." The guy took another 10 minutes staring at the bill and probably felt like the biggest ignoramus. I hope you guys like this video. If you did, make sure like, comment, share and subscribe the channel or posts.